Our scripture reading today comes from the book of Mark, chapter 6, beginning at verse 30. Hear the word of God. The apostle gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught, and he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place, all by yourselves, and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. And as Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away, so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and to buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." They had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up into heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. This is the word of the Lord. If we are faithful in our mission, offering to God even the small things that we can, then God will bless those things and can do some pretty big things. That is the message that we hear from this gospel lesson, this familiar gospel lesson of the feeding of the 5,000. And in this story, we see several things. And the first thing is that Jesus has compassion on the crowd. It says that Jesus and the disciples were trying to get off by themselves, but the crowd, the folks, followed them. And so when Jesus and the disciples kind of docked their boat and they saw all these folks waiting for them, it says that Jesus had compassion for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. He saw the condition of these people. He knew that they were hungry, not just physically, but also spiritually. And this condition of the crowd pulled on Jesus' heart, and so he wanted to do something to address their condition. Now, the disciples had a little bit different reaction to the condition of this crowd. They were a bit reluctant disciples, as they often are. They were overwhelmed by the crowd that they encountered, by the needs of the crowd that they encountered. They didn't want to have anything to do with this. They wanted someone else to handle this problem. They wanted it to be someone else's issue. So they tell Jesus, "Please tell all these people to go take care of themselves." And Jesus says, "No, you give them something to eat." But the disciples did not believe that they could do what Jesus had asked them. They did not believe that they could make a difference. The problem just seemed too overwhelming, too big. I mean, how could they feed 5,000 people? But as we see in this story, they give what they have. They bring a small offering to Jesus of how many loaves? And then what else? 2 fish. And Jesus takes that small offering and blesses it and gives it to the people. God blesses it and gives it to the people. And there is an abundance of blessings left over. As we have been going through our sermon series this summer, we've called it On a Mission from God. And so we've been trying to discern, what is the mission, what is the calling that God may have placed on my life? How can I say yes to that? And during this, we have been looking at stories that Jesus told, and we've also been looking at Old Testament prophets, the stories of the Old Testament prophets. And many of them have seemed pretty amazing. I mean, this story of feeding 5,000 people almost seems a little bit unbelievable. Some of the things that the Old Testament prophets did seem a little unbelievable. So while these stories are inspiring, they can also be a little bit difficult for us to relate to. I mean, how can we be expected to do these kinds of things? And so we're going to do something a little bit different today. We are going to hear the story of some folks in our community. Some folks who heard the calling of God on their lives, some people who perceived a mission from God, and people who said yes and were faithful and brought their small offerings that God then blessed and transformed into an abundance of blessings that has transformed the lives of countless people in our communities. And so as we hear their story today, perhaps God will inspire us to bring our small offering, to bring our 5 loaves and 2 fish, and to say yes when God comes calling. And so I'm going to welcome some guests up here to our chancel, the co-founders of the Out of the Garden Project, Don and Christy Milholland. Please welcome them to Starmount Presbyterian. We are so delighted to have you all here today. You are not strangers to Starmount by any stretch of the imagination. Lots of folks know you all personally and also know the work of Out of the Garden Project. But kind of to set the table here, I wonder for anybody who might not know, I wonder if you all might just tell them a little bit about what is Out of the Garden Project, what do you all do there?
Well, we are very happy to be here this morning, and when I walked through the doors, first thing, I felt like I was at home because the first several people that I came in contact with were people that I knew, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us. So Out of the Garden Project is we call it a food assistance program, but really it is a way that we are able to take food that is already really in our community and redistribute it to families that need it. We started 11 years ago in our home around our dining room table, packing bags for just a small group of kids at Moorhead Elementary School, and it's grown miraculously in those 11 years, and it's just been an awesome and amazing thing to watch. So I feel like I'm sort of a spectator in it because I know we sort of run it and kind of keep the ship going, but I really feel like it's everybody else in the community that's doing it and making the difference. So.
Very good.
Well, and I appreciate so much Starmount has been in this since the beginning, even before it happened. Evelyn Nadler and I shared a pilgrimage retreat weekend about 25 years ago, it's just so amazing that Evelyn would tell you if you ask her, please don't, but I am not capable of running this program. I am completely aware of that. I was a professional opera singer and then a church musician, but we were willing at a time, actually I must say Christy was willing. She came to me and said we need to feed hungry children as a good husband. I said that's just what I was thinking. We need to do that. and so we started with 6, but this past year distributed 3 million meals, and we're not capable of doing that, but you guys are. We still feel like we support 6 families. We've grown in tremendously different ways, and what I love about the Feeding of the 5,000 is, number one, in March of 2011, we fed 5,000 people with our project over a weekend, and we're not capable of that. I always thought it was interesting because I thought the Feeding of the 5,000 was an absurdly big number. Once we reached that in a weekend, I knew it was a very small number relative to what our Creator could have done. But it really is just miraculous how that willingness of doing something. I always tell people, if you want to do something, just start small. And we did for a whole year. We only served 6 to 8 families, and then it kind of changed after that. But we really do, as Christy said, we feel like we're along for the ride, that we're a willing spirit, but have no idea where it's going.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if you all might talk a little bit about that. Like you said, this is a large organization that serves thousands of people. You all didn't go to college to be nonprofit leaders. You didn't come into an already established organization, and I'm assuming that you probably didn't start out serving thousands and thousands of people. So I wonder if you might talk a little bit about both your personal histories prior to the organization, but then also, particularly Christy, that sort of moment that, Jesus had compassion on the crowds. I wonder if you might talk about that moment that you had where you felt sort of a calling and a tug at your heart.
Yeah, so like you said, we started out, and I always tell people that if we had been able to foresee into the future, to see what Out of the Garden Project is today and who knows what it might be in the next 10 years, I would have been completely too scared to take that step because, I thought Don and I, we committed that first year to make sure that 6 children at Moorhead Elementary School had enough food to eat. So we did that because I had sort of a heart transformation. My growing up was one that was kind of rocky, and my mom was a single parent of 4. Living in South Florida, my father passed away when I was a little girl, and I know my mom could have benefited greatly from a program like this. But fast forward to me being an adult and a parent, then seeing children that were probably going through a similar situation as I was when I was a kid, and I had realized that, do you ever have those moments that you look in the mirror and you think, what am I on this planet for? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And not that I feel like I have a greater purpose, but I thought, I know I can do this one thing. I know I can pack some groceries and put it in a bag and take it to my kids' school. And so that's really how it started. And folks would come around on Thursday afternoons, and they would gather around our dining room table and bring food along with them, and we would pack those bags of food. And to see now that we are still very similarly standing around tables, but it's at our warehouse, and we're packing food for many more families than we were back then. So,
and I think that I don't want anybody to think that we think we're special as we're talking about this, but it's funny how God prepares all of us, and I feel like I lived the first half of my life with my eyes wide shut, so to speak. I was a professional opera singer until I was 33. I'd sung more than 100 opera and oratorio roles, was teaching at Duke in Carolina, but I was bored because music wasn't really the fun part of me for music. It was playing with other people and community. And that's what church is all about. I went then into full-time music ministry for 15 years, and I thought that we'd been kind of prepared, I guess, for this all of our lives. But I grew up in the Midwest, and obviously you can tell I probably haven't missed a lot of meals, but my home was run down. There was no stucco on the outside, and I was made fun of what felt like every day of my life as a child growing up for the home I lived in because my parents couldn't afford to have it repaired. And so I really lived the first 33 years of my life trying to prove to all of those kids I went to high school with that I could do something they couldn't. And I knew I could sing from a very early age and got a scholarship and was very fortunate. Then it really was at 33 after going to Pilgrimage Weekend, kind of had a reawakening, went into full-time music ministry 6 months later. What I love about the Feeding of the 5,000 is not feeding the 5,000, but the 12 baskets of bread left over. And that just happened for us on Friday. I got a call from a distributor saying, hey, we have 1,100 pounds of Fritos in 2-ounce bags, 120 boxes. Could you use those? And I thought, why isn't it cans of pinto beans? But of course we can use Fritos. So I called Cindy and said, how many bags do you want for Vacation Bible School? And so it is those leftover 12 bags. I remember I was in a Bible study years ago, and Maurice Basin, who I think has since passed, wrote in wood, I understand feeding 5,000, but where did the baskets come from? And that's kind of how we go through life. Christy knows when something else has happened, I was always looking for miracles. And I'm not saying that I was challenging God, but I really had to leave full-time ministry, in my opinion, for my eyes to be opened. And this actually started in a Presbyterian church where I went to our pastor and said, we'd like to start a feeding program, and he had absolutely no interest. And so the next month, we started Out of the Garden Project. And so it is also those opportunities that God gives you when it doesn't necessarily look like an opportunity.
Well, I wonder, as you said, going from kind of a scarcity, a time of scarcity when you were younger, to a time of abundance, as far as when you talk about the food that you've collected. I know that on Friday they invited me that Out of the Garden has here in Greensboro.
Well, I also have to say Charlie was the coolest pastor in town on Friday with his shades and his ball cap, distributing food. He was incognito. And that is the most fun to me. To me, that's feeding the 5,000, that you get to see the people. You come out to our warehouse, and we distribute 2,000 bags, backpacks of food every weekend to schools, but you don't get to see them. You're there working at the warehouse. But I would go back to the fact that for us, it's all about building community, and we hope that the community that's built around the table is as important as those people that we have fed. But the statistics here in Greensboro, at least, or Guilford County, that back in 2015, we were the hungriest area of the entire United States, ranked number 1. And then business owners said, we can't tolerate that. We need to change those statistics because it looks bad when I'm hiring somebody if people are coming into the hungriest area of the United States. And so it's changed slightly. We are now number 9 in the United States. However, the number of children who are hungry are the exact same number that were in 2015. Some adults have changed. And so we still have more than 50,000 children every month that potentially go without food. We serve about 15,000 people a month, and so we're still less than 30% of those that are hungry. We're the largest agency doing what we do. The second largest backpack program distributed about 17% of the amount of food. So I'm just saying, let's say with everybody we serve 20% of the children. There's still a lot that go hungry. And you have played a part. I have to say that you have a long tradition. Brian Sterrett was just our board chair after 6 years. The Carpenter extended family, Carol on down, and the Porters and the Smiths, and your youth group used to pack rice for us when we first started. That was all to separate 50-pound bags of rice into pound units so we could give that in every backpack. And so what I was saying about feeding 400 families is that we can do that for $5 over a weekend. We can give them 2 meals for a family of 4 to eat over the weekend for $5. And like I said, we get about 1.5 million pounds of food donated, but my 4 trucks don't like to run on potatoes. They really want gasoline and diesel. And so we have, oddly enough, only 1 full-time person, myself, and 11 part-time people, but we have 7 vehicles because we're constantly picking up and delivering food. And our projects, our urban teaching farm, if you haven't seen it, it's a mile south of downtown. We have a farm manager who used to run the edible schoolyard at the Children's Museum. We have a shared use kitchen where we have 24 food entrepreneurs learning to provide products they can sell at the farmer's market. We reclaim food. We pick up every morning from 7 Panera Bread companies, nearly 1,000 pounds of food and that would just go to waste. Our first Walmart that we picked up, this was in 2011, they said, we're throwing away food. And I said, well, legally, Second Harvest has contracts that we can't pick up any food at any grocery store without their approval. They said, well, we're just throwing it away. And I said, well, okay, I'll come 3 days a week for a month. And I'd collected 10,000 pounds of food in 1 month from 1 Walmart store, just picking up 3 days, that was going into the landfill. And so that's that 12 baskets of bread. There is plenty. We're not keeping any food from anybody's mouth who needs it. We're also not keeping it from anybody from making money. We're just simply taking what has not been sold, or thankfully from people like you, donations to run our trucks, but that's how we're doing it. Our cash budget is considerably less than most churches, but we feed a lot of people for that. And so the numbers are kind of staggering. We've served 11 million meals since we've begun, just 3 million last year, and it'll be more than that this year. But it really is with that partner, that connection of everybody here and Cindy passing out these bags to children, that the impact we have. And while we don't talk about this, every piece of food we give out is a piece of God's love. We're not a religious organization, because I don't want to talk about it, because it'll make people not want to take it, the food possibly, or give. But we know every piece we give out is a piece of God's love that is transformed by our Creator. And that's really miraculous for y'all to come, stand around a table, touch that food, and then it goes out and touches, thousands of lives.
So just from some of those statistics, Out of the Garden certainly gives out a lot of food, but you do a lot more than just distribute food. As you all were talking with me earlier this week, and we've already mentioned here, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about some of those deeper aspects, the creation of community and the importance of equality in what you do here.
And I'll let Christy talk about that. I just want to say on Friday, thankfully Charlie was there I'm sorry, Charlie was there early on Friday to help. And even that small bit, he was standing directing people down the street. And I always tell our volunteers, you don't know if you talking to that family will be the only kind word they hear that day. And so whether you're saying good morning or move on down, it just, it is incredible. And Christy is community. She's the reason. I call her the heartbeat out of the Garden Project, and so she can certainly speak to the community.
Well, we started our program because we wanted to sort of, as Don always says, level the playing field and make sure that no child or family has to worry about having food or not. And seeing those children come up and, thinking that there are children in our town right now sitting this morning wondering if they're going to have a meal today. Like I said, we started our program packing food around our dining room table, and very intentionally at our warehouse, we had tables built to sort of mimic our dining room table. Now, they don't look like it, but, we can have about 8 to 12 people kind of gather around our tables at our warehouse, and we probably have 12 of them at our warehouse. And so on any given day when we have folks come, we have lots of different groups that come, but we try to mix those groups up so that if, like, you and your church come, you're not working just with yourselves. You're working with other people so that you get to meet other people, and you might get to meet other people that are from different faith traditions or different backgrounds. And so we're very intentional about kind of mixing up the groups so that people have an opportunity to maybe meet somebody or interact with somebody that they wouldn't normally have an opportunity to. Same as at our fresh mobile markets. We try very hard to think in the mindset of we instead of us and them, because I know for a fact that it only takes one incident in your family, whether it's a relationship that breaks up, or an injury or a death in the family. Like, my dad was hurt when I was 3 years old, and it really sent my family on a very tough road after that. But we know that it only takes a moment or a split second for something to happen in your family for you to be at the place of need that many of our families live in. And so we really try when we go out to our fresh and mobile markets, or any time that we're interacting with anybody, that it is us all together, because sometime I might need help, sometime you might need help, and we never try to think of it as we're helping them, because we just know at any moment it can be different. So we try to keep those philosophies and those thoughts kind of in the forefront of our trying to build community and create a beautiful community to live in, but also remembering that we're as vulnerable as the people that we're serving.
The one thing I was struck with as the cars were coming through that mobile market was that there were some cars, some families who looked like they might be in a food line, that they were in need, and there were plenty of families who, if they had pulled up next to you in traffic, you never would have known that they were in need of food.
Absolutely, yeah. It's interesting, just yesterday, I had a group out at the warehouse. Every other Saturday, we open up the warehouse for groups to come in, and there was a young boy standing around our table, and he had volunteered several other times before, and he said to me, he was a college student in grad school, and he said to me, is there any way that I can take part in getting some of this food? I'm actually going to the Fresh Mobile Market tomorrow afternoon, he was telling me. And I said, absolutely. You just go to the market a little bit early, go ahead and get in line, and you will very happily be served. So he was helping pack that food that he may have received that afternoon. So, you never can kind of look at somebody and assume.
In our scripture story, we talked about the reluctance of the disciples. They were a little hesitant. This was a big need. They weren't sure if they could do it. They were maybe a little scared. I wonder, either from the beginning when you were feeding 6 people, or now that you're feeding thousands, can you talk about a time where you maybe have felt that sense of hesitancy or fear, or not sure if we can pull this off?
Yeah, that is something that I felt on 3 occasions that I can remember.
I feel it every day.
Well, I was going to say, but I mentioned it out loud to my wife. I certainly do feel it every day because I have to come up with the money somehow. This is a time, for instance, that and it's every year, but it doesn't change my anxiety of wondering where the money's going to come from, because when school's out, people kind of stop thinking that there is a need. But we were doing this after a couple of years, and just so you know, that our project is phenomenal, and there are a lot of people in my situation that have 6-figure salaries. Just to let you know that after 8 years of working, my salary got back to where I left full-time music ministry 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So I mean, it's we do it because we absolutely love what we're doing. And yes, we are fortunate, but I'm just saying it is something that you can't not do. Would you remind me what I was saying?
I don't know.
What was your question? Oh yeah, fear. So it's an
yeah.
everyday thing. That's why I'm a little clogged up. And with age, as Evelyn would tell you, I don't think as quickly. But it was a couple years in, and I was thinking, you know what, I finally told my wife, I said, I need to stop doing this. And I was still in ministry, but I said, I need to get a real job that can pay real money, and we just need to stop doing that. And the next morning, Julie Luck, who was then with Fox 8 News, called and said, we want to do a spot on you and your wife on inspired living. Well, talk about feeling like dirt. And so, yes, I met with her, and then we continued doing what we're doing, and it's happened a few other times. But part of that is, do you have faith or not? When I was in full-time ministry, I can tell you I did not tithe 10% of what I should, because I wasn't willing to risk that. With Out of the Garden Project, I risk spending money all of the time. And any time I have hired somebody, our bank account at the end of the month is more than it was at the beginning of the month. And so it's a remarkable thing of faith. I laugh now that I feel like I was always asking God to let me see what was going on, and every time he does that, I can hear his voice saying, is that enough? Do I have to continue showing you what this is about? And he does. The miracles that happen are incredible. It doesn't mean that I don't have, I don't want to say constant anxiety, but I always am thinking, what if the money stops? Now, it hasn't in 11 years, but I'm just saying that I always think of, that's 15,000 families that won't eat next month if we stop doing what we're doing. And that's only possible, like the church we're at, the church on 68, they donate their warehouse to us, $50,000 a year, 12,000 square foot of space, that they donate to us because they feel so inspired that their warehouse, the pastor got a vision that their warehouse was supposed to be filled with food, and he thinks we're the answer to that vision. Well, whether you agree with that or not, it's amazing that a church would do that. We were talking, and if you want to see something miraculous, at 2:30 this afternoon at Lindley Elementary, Beth David Synagogue and College Baptist Church sponsor a Fresh Mobile Market together. And it's all about community to bring in those church groups together. But I would say the doubt is constant, but you try to have faith because it's always been that way. It's only when I've verbalized it those, half a dozen times that she'll say,
It's grown from 3 times to half a dozen times now.
Yeah, well.
And I said every day.
I just think it's going to sound really embarrassing if I say I have anxiety every day.
Or they were in a similar spot where you were in that they've had that moment where they said, gosh, there are hungry kids at my child's school, and I feel my heartstrings being pulled, but I'm not sure what to do with it. I feel a cause, or I feel a call to action. I feel God calling me, but I'm not really sure what to do. From your experience, what advice would you give people in that position?
Well, I'll let her answer, but I would just say first, see if somebody else, a nonprofit already, is doing similar to what you're talking about. Because really the last thing Guilford County needs is another nonprofit doing the same things. Even in food, we probably have 50. To give you an example, we're not only a provider of food to our own programs, but we gave out 200,000 pounds of fresh produce to 30 other food pantries in Guilford County. I'm just saying that if somebody's doing what you're doing, talk to them. And we're a little unusual because if you have a big enough dream, I'm liable to say, yeah, go ahead and do that. We can do that without the garden project because it's something we haven't thought of. And I think that it's like, Christy, if it is on your heart and gnawing at you more than just today saying, yes, I want to do that, but if you've been thinking about it, God's not going to let you go. I mean, you're going to have to do something. And so I would just say start small, serve 6 people, and you don't know. Serve 6 people or give a loaf of bread. You're feeding of the 5,000. I'm going to tell a story on her. She was picking up food from a bakery called Loaf Bakery that's no longer in existence. We were picking up food. She had some bread in her in the van that she had picked up, and she saw this woman on the side of the road with Psalm, I think, 8 or something. And so Chrissy said, hey, I don't have any food for you, but I have some bread. And she said, honey, do you know what this psalm is? And it was, give us, Lord, our daily bread. And so she gave her 3 loaves of bread. And just that little moment, is really just a cool beginning. So,
Yes, I'm trying to remember what the question was after all.
It was just, for folks who are
Oh, right, yeah.
what advice
and I just,
Well, I will,
wait, for every wife out there, I have to apologize. I don't ever remember what I'm going to say. And now she stammers, and I get so gleeful because it's been years that I can't remember what I'm going to say. And now I've rubbed off on her, so I apologize for that.
well, I will tell you honestly, though, for several years, probably 2 or 3 years, I pondered and I wondered and I felt this kind of need to do something, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And everybody has a life experience that leads you, hopefully, to do something, whether it is, working with animals or food or some experience. And so for me, looking back in my past and my childhood, and knowing that I could do something about it, giving food to somebody is really pretty easy. You just, pack a bag of food and you give it to somebody. But it took me a long time to kind of take that step. I was, I thought, I don't think I could sustain that. I don't think I can, do that long term. And nor did I think that Out of the Garden Project was going to become what it's become today. And so if I had been able to see, I would have never started it. But I did say to him finally, I just have to do something. And so he and I talked, and we called our social worker at the school, Kelly Ashley, and she was just amazing. And said, you know what, I know several families that need some food, and so let's start with 6. And so we said yes, and we committed to that for the first year. And really, little by little, and basket by basket, and loaf by loaf, and fish by fish, everybody else really has done what we kind of just started, and we feel like it's grown because of faith communities like Starmount or Beth David Synagogue or College Park Baptist, or individuals that come out and help us. So I would just say, if you have a feeling and it is in your gut and in your heart and you just feel so strongly and it won't let you go, then take that first little step and do something. And you never know what's going to happen.
On behalf of Starmount, I want to thank you not only for the impact that your organization has, but also the impact that the 2 of you have, and we want to thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having us.